Hello and welcome to the Addicts podcast. I'm your host Jamar. Today is episode 164, and we're going to be interviewing Danny M. How you doing, Danny?
Good. How are you? Thanks for
I'm
having me.
doing. No, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. So let's get started. Tell me about growing up in your childhood.
Oh, well, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, in a pretty culturally diverse neighborhood. Uh, went to Catholic school my whole life. Grandparents lived two doors down. They were immigrants. Um, every day was just the same thing. Went to Catholic school, came home, did homework, had dinner, that kind of thing. My dad was a Chicago police officer. Um, so he wasn't around a lot. My mom and dad have been married for 52 years now, but as a child, he was always working. He wasn't around that much. So, um, I guess it was no one's really ever asked me that before. I guess it's a kind of I don't want to say a stereotypical childhood, but it was just, I mean, the 70s, 80s, I'm 51 years old. So that's,
Yeah,
it was pretty interesting, pretty interesting childhood. I participated in sports, was very into my faith, the Catholic faith. It was a requirement. If I
that's what I
wanted to eat
say.
in my house, if I wanted to eat, I had to, on Sundays, you had to go to church. My mom was from Italy. So my grandparents never really spoke English. And it was like, the big Italian tradition on Sunday, the dinner and lunch. But you had to go to church. If you didn't go to church, you weren't eating. So I grew up in that type of environment. The neighborhood was pretty culturally diverse. Um,
What other
uh,
types of cultures?
Largely Hispanic, and then you had African American. Within 6 blocks. Chicago is very segregated. As it relates, at least back then. So once you cross Western Avenue going east, it was Inglewood pretty much, and it was African American. But it would we all pretty much. No one really. I don't remember any kind of like drama between races or anything like that. As a kid growing up, we all played football together. We'd meet at Gage Park and we'd play football, and we'd play baseball together. And there wasn't a lot of um I don't remember being hated or hating anybody. How about that? It wasn't part of the process back then. We just didn't never really got it. So
How was life at school?
it's pretty good. Um, you know, Back then I did have nuns teach. You don't really see that now, right? In the cat, like if your kids, people's kids go to Catholic school, you don't really see that. But I had nuns teaching. I had, um, um, regular lay faculty teaching. I did not do well in school. I would come to find out years later that I have dyslexia. So I did not do very well in school. I was an average student at best. In grade school, and had a great deal of difficulty reading, especially reading out loud. I'd become anxious, and I get the words would get jumbled up in my head, and I could never get it out. And I remember people laughing at me because of that. I remember that. So that was pretty. It was pretty intense. That when someone would call on me to read out loud in class, from as far back as I can remember, I'd start freaking out in my head because I just couldn't read very well.
Yeah, I don't think I had dyslexia, but I remember I used to get so nervous getting called on in class to read. I don't know why. I mean, I was an okay reader, but I still had just an overwhelming sense of like panic when it came time for me to read.
Yeah, it was very difficult for me. And when I'd have to read books and stuff, it just didn't work. Later on in life, I would formally get tested by a psychologist to find out that I had dyslexia. So I made sure to bring my parents that report and said, here's for all the butt whoopings I got for bad report cards. And I hope you feel guilty now because I told you something was wrong. You didn't listen to me. So, yeah.
So, what exactly is dyslexia? How does that work?
Uh, Dyslexia is, I don't know what they classify it as, but it's basically from my perspective, my dyslexia, what it kind of represents is when you're reading, you really don't retain. the information. You have a hard time putting sentence structure together. Um, you have a hard time focusing on the words, uh, and reading out loud. So when I read out loud, even to this day, like I'm reading, the word could say here, you can add spinach and mushrooms, right? It says on this piece of paper. I'll be reading it in front of somebody. And I'll be like, you can, you can add spinach and mushrooms to the eggs for taste if you would like. That's kind of what it sounds like, right? Because I have a hard time digesting those words. Um, yeah, reading comprehension, you can forget about it. I can read something 800 times and I couldn't tell you. I'm a horrible test taker. When it comes to big tests, I have horrible, it's not an anxiety. I'm not nervous about taking the test, but once I get into test reading the questions, I have to read. I need extra time for any tests. When I took collegiately later on, I'd have to get extra time. So it was very, very difficult to navigate that. And I always felt like there was something wrong. And in the third grade, I remember in the third grade, um, a teacher telling my parents, you need to take them to this reading lab. And they took me to this, I think it was University of Chicago. Um, Again, this is 1970 something, right? So they took me there and they tested me. And, I don't really remember what the outcome was, but I was going there for a little while. And then my parents stopped taking me. I don't know if they told them that, don't bring me, or the insurance didn't cover it, or whatever it was. But yeah, it was definitely an issue, and it really impacted me in high school too, and then college on the front end.
Did you have trouble with the kids because of it when you were young?
I mean, some kids would make fun of me, but you know, um, it'd make me sad and upset, but I don't think um, I was pretty decent at sports, particularly football. So, um, if someone made fun of me, I'd take it out on the field. You know what I mean? Like when they caught
Yeah.
the ball, I'd make sure I'd get over there in a hurry and, maybe take care of a little business, that kind of thing.
Did you enjoy playing football?
I did. That was my favorite thing to do. As a kid, back then they would say, you hear people complaining all the time. My generation would say, like we stayed out to the street lights, and that was legit. I never wanted to come home when I was playing football. That's all I ever wanted to do, from the time I got up in the morning till the time I went to bed, it was play football. And if I wasn't playing it, I was watching it. That was my favorite thing to do.
What kind of grades did you get in school?
C's, I'd get an occasional D. Maybe if I was really interested in the topic or the class, like my senior, I remember all through high school, I had C's, occasional B, but mostly C's. I'd have a D here and there. And my parents would say, if you fail and you got to go to summer school, you're gonna go to the local high school. And I didn't want to go there because I played football for my high school and I had friends there. And so I would try my hardest and I get C's. I mean, I would really work and I would get a C, and then occasional B. If I was really interested in a topic, like my senior year, I remember taking psychology, and taking criminal justice, criminal law, and I got A's in those classes because they really interested me, and I seemed to kind of grasp those concepts pretty quickly, and it was interesting. So in those classes, I did get A's, but those were the only one. Math, science, forget it. Science and math, it wasn't even, and to be fair, I couldn't have cared less. I wanted to, play football or live my life. And that was it. I planned on going in the military out of high school, and I did not. So I went on to community college and just kind of floated through there. Again, C's, B's. If the topic really interested me, criminal justice courses or psychology courses, I got an A. But anything other than that, I didn't. And I was really concerned in community college about drinking. So that was one of the things that That was kind of my, like every day after school, I'd go to this guy's house and we'd have a case of beer, and just hang out in the yard. Or in the garage, it'd be freezing cold and we'd have a barbecue going in there like stupid. Like now I'm thinking I'd carbon
Yeah.
monoxide poison and kill myself. But, just to drink a case of beer or something, we'd get some guy to buy us a case of beer, some older dude, hey, you buy us beer. And, that was like my thing.
What year or what age, I should say, were you ever first exposed to like drugs? Now, when did you first know what it was? Like, did your parents drink even casually, or
Well, my dad has, my dad's been sober for about 28 years, right? So, my grandfather was an alcoholic. My uncle, pretty much everybody on my dad's side of the family that was male was an alcoholic. Uh, I don't want to say it was predestined, but I'm pretty sure that, that's kind of how it was going to end up for me. The first time I drank a beer, I was 13 years old. And I was in a guy's garage that I went to grade school with who ended up transferring to another grade school, but he still lived in the neighborhood. And I drank with a bunch of guys in his garage. I was 13 years old. I was going into eighth grade. Uh, I never really, it wasn't a regular occurrence then. But then, um, as I got older in high school, I'd start sneaking stuff from my dad's bar. You know, he had this big bar in the basement that they had built. Like now I look at my basement's a gym. If I bought a house with a bar, I would tear that thing right out. Because the
yeah,
misery that it caused me. But I'd go down to my dad's bar and I'd sneak here and there every once in a while if I was getting anxious about something, or worried about something. I just, I'd have a couple of drinks and it would calm me down. And again, it wasn't really a regular thing until probably my junior year of high school. Junior year of high school, I started going to parties. I was able to drive, and then it became more of a regular thing. Really, my senior year, that's kind of what I spent doing on my weekends. Was um, going to parties and having beer and stuff like that. Um, and then in college, it was everything. That's pretty much all I ever did.
how
Um,
old were you? How old were you when your dad got sober? You said
uh,
28 years, so what was it?
20.
Like,
I was 23.
yeah, I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
So he was an alcoholic when you were growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a binge guy. He's a binge guy. I was reading some statistics before I came on here about binging, and he was a binge guy. He wouldn't, um, in full disclosure, I spent 20 years in law enforcement, most of them with the Chicago Police Department. My dad was a Chicago police officer, right? Um, so I never really got into drugs. I know I could have easily gotten into drugs, but I was petrified that I wouldn't be able to get on that job if I ever, there were opportunities that came up, to do some, like weed or something at a party. And I'm like, oh man, if I do that, he's going to kill me. And it was just an intense fear that, or losing the job was always in the back of my mind, but I would drink until I was oblivious. But I was 23 when he got sober. Um, so like I said, he was a binge guy, and he, a big binge guy. Like he wouldn't drink, he wasn't an everyday guy. He wasn't a functional, but if he did drink maybe once a month, he would get obliterated. He wouldn't know when to stop. One was too many and 100 ain't enough. And that's kind of like, that's where mine was too, but there were times that I'd have to, like I would have to drink to, I worked undercover, uh, in the narcotics unit where I bought drugs. And I was so petrified of doing that job that I might drink a half dog of whiskey before just to take the nerves off and be able to do it because I hated it. I hated my boss. And I always felt like I was not accomplishing anything, doing that job. I felt like I wasn't helping anybody.
Why
I
is
wasn't.
that?
Well, I mean, I have my whole ideology on drug arrests, right? We're just perpetuating a cycle of negativity,
Yeah.
especially when you're arresting somebody that's got a bag of dope on them. You're like, why would I want to do that? I'm just going to put this poor guy or gal back in the system that doesn't give a crap about them, right? So, I mean, at 51 years old now with a doctorate, 3 master's degrees, and dyslexia, um, and being sober. I have 2 years now, but I had a long-term sobriety of 7 years. I was off of, alcohol and doing well for 7 years, and I relapsed, and I drank for 14 years and I lied to myself. So all 14 years, and I knew what I was doing was stupid, and I knew what I was doing was crazy, for me. And I would tell myself, like, oh, let's just get through this. My kid played hockey. So a big thing with the hockey parents or baseball any parents is, the cooler afterwards. Well, I was the cool dad. I always had the cooler full of beer. Everyone wanted to be around me. And, I loved being that guy, but I also hated being that guy, because I knew that I had a problem and I couldn't stop, and I would beg people to stay when people were like, hey, I got to go home. I got to work tomorrow. No, stick around. Have one more, have two more. You know what I mean? Like it, for 14 years, my addict brain kept telling me, like, no, don't worry about it. You can control it. I wouldn't drink for 1 week and I'd be like, see, you're good, but then when I drank, it was like, a 1 or 2 day bender, and, it was very difficult, and that manifested itself pretty early, you know, so it's tough.
So, what age did you think you first realized you kind of have an issue? Well, actually, let me ask you this: what age were you when you first joined the police department?
21 years old.
So you were a kid.
Yeah.
Um, is
I
that
got, I,
a
I got into law enforcement at 18 as an explorer, 17 as an explorer, which is like, you ride along with the police, you might volunteer at a police station. I did that in a suburb of Chicago. And then I became a community service officer at 19 years old. You're just like chasing loose dogs or helping people in the, as a suburb. So you're helping people with different non-essential police calls, directing traffic at accidents or things like that, running errands, dropping off court papers. So I did that. That was my first paid job in law enforcement. But in Illinois, you have to be 21 to be a full-time sworn police officer. And that's how old I was when I got my first full-time sworn job. So I was exposed to that life pretty early, and it impacted me, not in a positive way. I was probably too young to do that. So
I was just about to say, it's amazing how they hire. I mean, at that age, you're so young to see certain things. You know what I mean? Especially to process certain things. It's supposed to be mature about them.
yeah, it was a lot of responsibility for someone very young, and having to live up to my dad's expectations was, it was terrible. My dad was a bomb tech, and he disarmed a bomb, a real bomb. And he won all these awards and stuff like that. And I always felt like, I was like his flunky son, because I didn't do anything like that. So I had that kind of thing always in my mind, like chasing those shoes, trying to fill those shoes. And when I first started at 21 years old, it was like an opportunity that came up that does not come up all of the time. And I tested for a federally funded narcotics task force. Right. So I got hired. I was one of 12 people. And then they asked me, a guy came up to me when I was in narcotics identification school, like learning about narcotics. Now, I was an athlete and I was in law enforcement young as an explorer. So I really didn't get into the drug scene. It was all drinking for me. And a guy came up to me and goes, hey, how old are you? And I go, I'm 21. He goes, I know you got to be 21 to be a cop, but you look like you're like 14 years old. I shaved like twice a week. He's like, you want to buy drugs undercover? And I'm like, I don't know about that, man. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be really good at that. And he's like, he goes, I read in your personnel file, your dad's a cop in Chicago on the HBT team, which is the SWAT team. And he works in the gang crimes unit. I said, yeah. He goes, go home and ask him if he thinks you should work for Meg. I said, okay. So I went and asked him, and he's like, oh yeah, those guys get a car. They get to do whatever they want. They dress in soft clothes all the time, which is plain clothes. They're like undercover guys, grow their hair long, all that stuff. I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, you should definitely do it. and I did it, and it was like pounding the round peg in the square hole. It just was not me at all. I did not, it was terrible. And I really didn't have the best supervisors either. These guys were, old crotchety guys, and they didn't really want to mentor anybody, and a lot of them were kind of envious, I think, because I was so young and I got that job, and they probably worked like 20 years before they got in that unit, so uh, they weren't very, very astute in the ways of leadership. So it became just a nightmare. It was like a nightmare. I hated it. I hated going to work every day. And there was a time where I wanted to quit. I'm like, this is not me. I was just going to quit the job in general. And I went to my dad and I said, hey, man, I want to quit. And he's like, why do you want to quit? And I said, it's not me. This whole cop thing isn't me, And he's like, you're waiting to get on the Chicago Police Department. Why don't you wait till you get there? And it's going to be better. It'll be different. You're not, doing, you're not buying drugs undercover and stuff. I go, yeah, but I hate this. You know what I mean? Like I might not get hired for Chicago for like another 2 or 3 years. Like I'm 20 at the time. I'm like 22 years old, 23 years old. And I hate what I'm doing. Like I hate it. So, um, I really wanted to go in the military out of high school, and he was against it because he's a Vietnam veteran. He was in the Army. He was, my dad's I'm average, I'm 5'10". My dad's 5'4", right? So he crawled around in tunnels in Vietnam. That was his deal. So
That's some
yeah,
scary shit.
at 19 years old. So, like the alcoholism and everything like that, I can understand, and I remember him telling me that, not, not to be a wimp, but he used another word. And don't tell anybody at work that I'm scared or they're going to fire me. And don't tell, I mean, it was not very, like, well, what's going on or anything like that. And in 1993 or 94, there wasn't employees assistance programs or any kind of counseling sessions to go to. Everyone's like, just here, have a Miller Lite and shut up. That was it. Alcohol was a lot that's how you dealt with everything. Come on, kid, let's go to the bar. Right. So, that was not healthy at all. And, I wanted to quit. He talked me out of it. And I remember telling him, I want to be a football coach in high school and like a history teacher or something. And, he laughed and he said, you're nuts, just stick this out. Everything will be fine. So followed he was kind of a mentor. So I followed his advice, and I ended up going to Chicago. And, I didn't, really, I ended up working in a patrol unit, and then, going to the same unit he was in, special ops. And I was there. We went across, it was a citywide unit. You went to the worst areas of the city, and, you were there to combat violence, like shootings, homicides. You were there to, make sure that those things didn't happen by being highly visible and all those good things. So, and then in that unit, they picked people for the SWAT team. They called it Hostage Barricade Terrorist Team, HBT. So naturally, I wanted to do that because my dad did it. So I made that team. And no matter, I could have been the best HBT guy on the planet, but it wouldn't have mattered because I was my dad's kid. You know what I mean? Like it was always, oh, you're Danny's son. My dad's Danny too, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. I could have like caught in the world's most wanted terrorist. I brought him in, and they'd be like, "Oh, where's your dad?" You know what I mean? Like, so there's nothing I could have done. So chasing that shadow made it really, really miserable. But then it towards the end of my career, I really started liking it because I ended up being promoted to a sergeant. I went to patrol. I went back to the SWAT team. To be the support, weapons of mass destruction, safety, and support. I had learned a lot about WMD while on the SWAT team as a police officer. I went to a lot of training for it. And when I made sergeant, they brought me back to kind of run that aspect of the team. And I also became the chief hostage negotiator because my first master's is in counseling psychology. So that's when I really liked it. I hit the point in my career I was like, I love this because I was actually helping people, if that makes sense. Like I'm talking to this person who is in the point of their life where that, I'm going to take my own life. I have nothing to live for. My girlfriend left me. I lost my job. My mom just died. You know, I can't deal with this. And you talk to this person for 8 hours and they came out of the house alive. I had goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about these incidents. Like I actually made an impact today. This is what I'm talking about when I say help. Like now I am actually helping somebody. Right. And this is what I was born to do. Right. Um, and then I got hurt. So I've had 3 or 4 surgeries, 3 to be exact, with 4 procedures on my hand. And it's my weapon hand. So the rules of the police department are if you cannot safely operate a weapon, you cannot be a police officer. So I had 20 years of service. I was 41 years old and I had to leave the job. So
Well,
that was pretty tough.
that's kind of lucky that you got 20 years in, so you got your pension, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And since it's duty related, they really take care of you when you get hurt in the line of duty. Some people get hurt where, they're impaired for life, shot or something like that. I broke my wrist, and um, it required surgeries. It required removing bones. It required moving nerves. It was pretty intense. And I was drinking at that time. So that year that I was off of work, I would drink a case of beer and eat a pizza a day. You know what I mean? Like I just didn't care about anything. I was miserable. I went from being miserable on the job to loving the job. And now it's miserable. That coupled with raising an autistic, well, now he's 22, but he was diagnosed the day before his second birthday. I have a son with autism, and then 2 neurotypical children, raising them, being divorced from their mom, and having them being their residential parent, right? And being responsible for all their bills and everything. It was just, I went into a deep, dark hole, and it was hard. It was hard to crawl out of that. It really was. And everyone would always come over to my house because it was a party house. You know what I mean? Like I had a garage with the fridge and beers and TVs and, sound system. And we just sit in the garage, watch football all day and drink from 10 in the morning till, well, I don't know, 3 in the morning, start gambling in the garage. It was bad. It was bad, man, for that 14 years. And every time I did it, the next day I'd wake up and said, you were sober for 6 years, 11 months, 2 weeks of your life. What the F are you doing right now? Like I would beat myself up so badly because that almost 7 years of sobriety was when my son was diagnosed, when my kid's mom and I got divorced, and I made solid decisions. You know what I mean? Like I was like, okay, well, this is happening, so we're going to do this. Right. And then one day I just relapsed. I was with the guy that I worked with on my partner on the HBT team, and we were at a Hooters. I wasn't drinking, and he got himself a bucket of beers, and I'll tell you exactly what happened. He looked at me, he goes, "You want a beer?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I want a beer." Just like that. Just like that. After 6 years, 11 months, and 2 weeks. Just like that, like this. Instantly. Yep, give me that beer. And, I didn't like hit the ground where I'm like, okay, I'm going to have one and see what happens, right? See if the monster comes out. I think I had like 18 beers, and then I get in the car and drive home like an idiot. I'm lucky I didn't kill anybody or myself. You know what I mean? Losing the job. That's not even, I'm not even worried about that. I'm worried about killing somebody, right? Because I'm an idiot. So I hit the ground running, man. I was off to the races. And then after that, it was like, hey man, it worked out nice, huh? Worked out nice. Let's repeat this. So people who knew I was sober for long-term sobriety, they were puzzled at my drinking, but also a lot of people liked that I drank because, I was a lot of fun when I drank, according to them. I look back, it's embarrassing. There's pictures of me at my son's hockey tournaments where there's, 22 empty beer bottles, like 6 hours. And they took a picture of me. They're like, oh, this guy, You're a machine. I'm like, yeah, all right, let's go. Where are we going now? Let's go out somewhere. To me, it was just stupid. Now I look back, I'm like, how embarrassing for my son. Your dad's the team idiot dad. I just, I continually beat myself up even to this day for allowing myself to let that happen. But I do give myself a break every time I go through the steps or I go to an AA meeting, or I talk to my sponsor when I start feeling that way. And I cut myself some slack, because, it was hard. It was a disease for me and it was hard, it was really hard. It was, and during that time I got a doctorate while I was drinking, got 2 more master's degrees. And third master's I was sober. So that was a different one. But, you know, had I had not had those experiences, what would I have drank more? You know what I mean? Like these questions I asked myself, like if I didn't have those things, like the sense of responsibility to get work done, I would just drink more, you know what I mean? Or found another excuse to party. So those things, that education piece for me, um, because people say, what are you doing as an ex-cop with a doctorate and 3 master's degrees? I'm like, well, I do mental health therapy with first responders, right? And counselor. And I teach at a college and I educate all first responders going back to school to get bachelor's or master's degrees. So in a way that helped me, but I think it helped me more by giving me that sense of responsibility and keeping me away from drinking, if that makes sense. Refocusing, repurposing my time. You got me thinking, man.
Yeah, that's my goal. That's what I want.
Yeah.
That's what I want you thinking about.
Yeah.
Um, so when did you recognize, okay, this is getting out of hand? I'm drinking too much. This is just not good.
Well, the first time I had just gotten married to my kid's mother, and I was still living the life of a single guy. After work, let's go out and drink until 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. You're watching the sunrise in Chicago, standing outside of some bar, because you go to the bar's going to close at 2. So then you go to the 4 o'clock bar, then you drink at the 4 o'clock bar till that closes. And then in your car, I'd have a cooler, I have a cooler in there. So when that bar closed, at least we'd have a couple more beers and we just sit there. And so, I had a daughter, who was 1 year old. She's 24 now, right? She's going to be 24 this month. So, I had a daughter who was, like less than a year old. My wife at the time was, very upset about me coming home like this all of the time. And so we went to a counselor. Police department provided. They had this place. They call it employees assistance now, but back then it was called St. Michael's House. St. Michael's, the archangel and the patron saint of protectors. So we went to St. Michael's house, and this guy, we had some marriage counseling, and I thought it was ridiculous to be married such a short time, having to go to marriage counseling. But as a counselor now, not necessarily, but back then I'm like, what am I doing? And I was
I think all couples should have to go to counseling.
sure, agreed. I treat police officers now, and I'll have the spouse come into a session, and I talk about trauma, and I talk about what that looks like, to a police officer and how they think. And that sometimes it turns on a light switch with them. They're like, oh, not excusing the behavior, maybe explaining it, So this guy told me, he goes, hey man, I think you got a drinking problem. I'm like, get out of here. A drinking problem. He's like, well, that's all she's talking about is you're drinking, like okay. So I recognized the problem, and then I got, in a little bit of a jam off duty, let's say. Nothing, nothing, where I hurt anybody or anything like that. Is more silly than anything. But at the time, it wasn't funny. You know what I mean? Like now I look back and I say, wow, that was stupid. Is nothing like that was going to get me like fired or, anything like that. But it was embarrassing. So I went and I said, I'm going to go into alcohol rehabilitation program. So I did. I went and got sober, detoxed, all that stuff. And then Went to the 28-day program at the time. This was 1999, May 15th of 1999. And I was sober until April. I mean, if I do the math, I know I was sober for 6 years, 11 months, and 2 weeks. So like the end of April, you know, and of 2006. And that's when I relapsed. But I knew back then when I was going to counseling with her, I knew I had a problem when I was in college. You know what I mean? Like when I'm going to this guy Chris's house every day after school and we're pounding a case or two of beer between four of us, that's a problem. You know what I mean? When I wasn't working at the police department as a community service officer, I'm at this dude's house till 9 o'clock. I'm not doing homework. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do in community college. I'm at this dude's house. I knew it was a problem, but it was like my identity. It's like what everyone knew me was party guy. This guy's a party guy. He's fun. But I knew it was a problem. I love the attention, but I didn't like the attention. I would have rather that attention come in a different way than just me being a party guy or waiting for me to do something ridiculous or get in a fight with somebody, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I knew it was a problem then, but it really started like I have a real problem here when I had to go to counseling with my kid's mom. And then after relapse, when I started drinking again, instantaneously, I knew it was wrong. Instantaneously, I knew I had a problem. And I would keep lying to myself. I'd put benchmarks like, I'm not going to drink this week because I won't have a problem then. If I don't drink this week, see, I can control it. Control it. No way. One beer and it was it, and I didn't have to fight with the demons then, the demons that come, and start talking to you and telling you all the things that you have to be pissed off about or all the things that you did wrong or everything, those demons, or the things you saw. That was even worse. Things I saw in my career, what people did to each other, or stuff that happened directly to me, like drinking solved that. The guys were right. You know what I mean? Like, just drink it up, kid, and everything will be fine. They were right about that, but they never told me about the misery that came with it. They never told me about that. So, I knew from the moment I relapsed, I knew the next day I was like, this is a problem. And I stopped drinking. Like, I'm going to quit drinking again. It wasn't long before someone at work said, hey, you want to go get a drink? Yeah, let's go get a drink. Sounds like a great idea. So yeah.
What was the turning point in your life where you decided you needed to get sober?
Well, my second marriage failed, and I was having issues, and Danny boy, my son with autism, he's reaching 22 years old pretty soon, so he's going to age out of school. I got to start taking responsibility for that. I'm his guardian. When he's 18, I get appointed as guardian. My other two children, they need me, in a way, to support them a little bit differently than when they were kids. And I just think that, just one day I woke up and I was like, someone who was a close friend of mine at the time, said to me, you need to quit drinking. You're not the same person, when you're drinking than when you're sober. When you're sober, you're a brilliant person that cares about people and you're always putting yourself out there helping people. When you're drinking, you're like, a selfish savage. You're just drinking. Hey, you want another beer? Here, you want another beer? Let's have another beer. Hey, well, you're like on a whirlwind, So I realized that if I were going to continue this, one day it clicked that 6 years, 11 months, 2 weeks, you were sober. You made some really good decisions. You really made some really, really good decisions. So, that coupled with, advice from friends and, people that I really cared about and loved that saw, what was going on that I didn't necessarily see, that one day I just said, okay, it's time. It's time. So I jumped back in the AA meetings. I jumped back into that, called an old friend. Um, when I relapsed, uh, the hardest part about that for me, like the biggest punch in the gut, was when my sponsor came up to me with my 7-year coin and he went to hand it to me. And I said, "You're going to have to keep that." And he went, "Oh, no." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "When?" I go, "About 2 weeks ago." And he's like, "You were so close, like, all right, well, we can get you back. Let's get back. Let's get back." And I'm like, "Nah, I'm good. I kind of like this life." You know what I mean? I kind of like this. So thanks, but no thanks. So that was hard. So I ended up calling, uh, I didn't call him because I had heard he had relapsed years later. And then he passed away. So I called a friend of mine who had long-term sobriety, 25 years. And I asked him to sponsor me and told him what I was doing. We met for coffee. We talked for about 4 hours. And that's when I knew this time that I need to be sober. I'm better sober. I'm better for everybody in my life sober, especially me, most importantly. So that was the turning point, being 49 years old. I was 28 the first time I got sober. You want to talk about difficult, especially in my world. You'd be outside after work. Everyone would go in the parking lot with coolers of beer and guys would go to hand a beer. You're like, "No, I don't drink." "What do you mean you don't drink?" "I don't drink." "Well, you're 28 years old, man. You should be drinking." "No, I don't drink." And then guys would say, "Oh, you can't trust somebody who doesn't drink." You're like, "Really?" Really?
I think it should be you can't trust someone that does.
I, I totally agree with you. I'm like, if you get, you know, in a crap show right now, who are you going to want? The guy who's sober or the guy that's drunk that's going to be helping you out of this? But you don't think of that stuff. And 28 years old is very hard to maintain sobriety. At 49, it's still difficult because I have the disease, and I do a lot of self-reflection, a lot of praying, and a lot of giving myself to God to help me. And it works for me. Um Man, the both times the turning point was, self-realization that this is probably going to kill me. It's probably going to kill me. And I need to be here for my family and I need to be here for people. That my job on earth is not done yet. So it gets me by. But to answer your question, it was both a lot of self-realization. The first time was, my wife at the time saying, "Hey," and then the second time was my marriage fell apart. It fell apart years before I quit drinking, and I just stayed in it to because it was convenient. You know what I mean? Like, it was my ex-wife's house, and I had a 3.5 car garage built. It was heated. I had 2 TVs in there, big time college football days. Guys would come over 10 in the morning with cases of beer, and we were watching college football game day, and then watching the 11 o'clock game, the 2:30 game, the 6 o'clock game, then, like a 9 o'clock game, and then we'd be there and then maybe play cards at 1 in the morning. It was convenient, but I knew that, I wasn't happy. My kids weren't happy, in that situation. And I had to get myself out. So I knew that I made good decisions when I was sober that first time. So I got sober again. It was hard. It was harder this time, to get sober. It was hard at 28, and at 49, I say it was easy, but it was harder because the 14 years that I was in relapse, I was having a great time. And then the first year of my sobriety, this time, my kids still on a travel hockey team. We're going all over. And we had the COVID going, right? This is a good story. So one of the dads shows up at the hockey tournament, and we're in the room where all the parents and everyone meet. And I before I went down there, I said some prayers. I said a rosary. told God, give me strength. I didn't want to be antisocial, right? Because I got along with kid, got along with everybody. So, and my kid wanted to watch a movie in the room with his teammates. Okay. Well, I'm not going to sit there with a bunch of 17, 18-year-old boys. I can't, I don't have the time for you. I can't, it's just a pain in the ass. So I'm like, okay, I go downstairs. I said a rosary before I went down, God, give me the strength, went downstairs. So one of the dads is like, hey, you want a beer? And everyone knew I quit drinking. This guy is the first tournament he's on. His wife usually came to the tournaments. And I said, no, man, I quit drinking. And he's like, what? He's like, wait a minute. Did I hear that right? Like, it's a big deal. And he goes, let me get this straight. We've got COVID going down. The whole world's closed down. We got all these problems. Colleges are, canceling classes, and Danny quit drinking. He goes, I think that's the biggest shocker of the year. That's sums up my drinking. Oh, I mean, if this guy is that shocked with COVID going on, the world shut down, that I quit drinking, that's such an impact to him. So that's why it was hard, because I loved that. I don't know if that makes sense. I loved that attention. I loved being that guy, because everyone always wanted to be around me. I mean, my jokes and the stuff I would say when I was drunk and stuff, they would just get the biggest kicks out of them. And then they could talk me into, hey, let's go to a strip club. All right, sounds like a great idea. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, let's go. They could get me to do anything when I was boozed up. When I was sober, it's like, man, you go have fun storming the castle, man. I'll talk to you
Yeah.
later. Call me for bond if you need it. That's it. And I might not give it to you. Maybe you need to sit there and think about yourself for a while, right? So that was, it was hard, man. It was hard both times. Who am I kidding?
So how long are you sober now?
Uh, it was 2 years on August 19th.
Oh, happy 2 year anniversary.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that.
That's awesome. So what's life like for you nowadays?
Oh, it's great. I have a great partner. She's wonderful. I have 3 stepkids, you know, uh, um, 6-year-old twins and an 8-year-old. Um, my son Danny, 22, he's aged out of the school system. He goes to an occupational day school in a suburb of Chicago, where he actually works that job. Like, I couldn't believe it. Like, I got teary eyed when they told me. Like, I never thought he'd be able to do it. He works like puts like bottles of wax and car wax, turtle wax has um, a contract with them, and then some company that makes horse shampoo, and they just pack the boxes and load it up for shipping. So they say, yeah, he just does an assembly line job. I'm like, that's awesome. My daughter, she's going to be 24. She's an accountant, downtown Chicago, KPMG, a big firm. So she's got her own place. I'm really proud of her. She's doing well. And then my youngest son is 20, and he's majoring in special ed, because, he's like, hey, I've had my brother my whole life. I kind of like helping out in that. And he's always volunteers for Special Olympic stuff. Danny does Special Olympics. So,
Oh, cool.
my life is really good, man. My life is I, being sober. This right now, this is it, man. Like, I, I couldn't be happier. I don't miss that life, not one bit.
No, me neither.
Yeah.
Not one bit. It's a sad and lonely place to be, addiction.
It is. It's horrible. And on the surface, you may be the fun guy and all that stuff, but I was really lonely on the inside.
Oh yeah, underneath you're hurting.
Yeah. It was a terrible place to be. I mean, the childhood traumas, and the traumas from the job, and like, I felt like I lived a false life. You know what I mean? Like, all those years, like, who the hell was I? I guess I was kidding everybody. I put on a good face. It's like the face of a clown. Everyone loves a clown.
Yeah.
So here I am. I play in a bagpipe band. I've been playing bagpipes for a long time. And that's probably like the most, that's probably the worst place to be for someone who's sober, because that's all it's about, in the bagpipe band. It's the culture. And, when I went to Scotland to play in the world championship with the band, that's all we did all day long was, I mean, you went and practiced, and then you drank all night till 4 or 5 in the morning. Then you went to bed for 2 hours. You got up, practice. I mean, it's a very hard place for a sober person to be. Although I know many people who are sober that do it now. Because when I got sober, guys are like, "Oh, you're not drinking." I'm like, "No, I quit drinking." And they're like, "Oh, you friend of Bill and Bob's?" Yeah, yeah, you too. Yeah, me too. And then guys in the band will be like, what's that mean? Friend of, yeah, I know Bill too. You talking about, Bob Oshevsky over there? No, no, not
Mhm.
Bob Oshevsky. No, you wouldn't know this Bill and Bob. Believe me, you don't know this Bill and Bob. Right. So, you find people like that, but it's like, I feel good, I feel better. And I stop lying to myself, and lying to other people, pretending to be something I wasn't, you know, like being the real me and not have to remember the lie you told. You know what I'm talking about? Like you're
Oh
telling
yeah.
somebody, like, oh yeah, I once climbed the Empire State Building, with just my shoes in my hands, and they're like, what? You're like, yeah. And then, yeah, I got to remember that lie, it's like, I, I don't have to do that anymore.
I know
It's,
it's the greatest feeling in the world, being honest.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Yeah, man. It's good. My dad pointed out though, when I told him, I said, "Hey, I'm back. I'm gonna get sober again." My dad tends to say the darndest things. He goes, "You know what? Hang on a minute. You know what? If you would have stayed sober, you'd be 22 years sober." Thanks for pointing that out. I appreciate it, brother. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. You don't think I kick myself in the ass every day for that? For the last 14 years, the stupid decisions I made, man. But now it's good. It's good. I I feel great. I feel great, man. I'm glad you do too.
Yeah, no, I definitely do. I definitely do. So I've got one last question for you. I ask
Sure.
everybody this question. You have any advice for people listening?
Oh yeah. First of all, got a lot of advice. First of all, if you think you have a problem, get some help, right? Uh, get yourself checked in, get yourself detoxed, get in a program, go to the meetings, work the steps. It works. It works. And you'll be better off for it. You'll be better with every aspect of your life, especially you, which is the most important thing, right? You have to fight the demons, when you're sober. You know what I'm talking about. You still have to fight them, but you'll learn that through the grace of God, through other people in the program, through your sponsor, working the steps, you're you're going to be able to have the tools to be able to fight those demons and stay sober. So my advice would be, if you think you have a problem, and get help. Don't keep thinking about what it's like. If you do, I might not have a problem, right? And just because you don't drink for a week, or you don't drug, you stop your drug cycle. I mean, my thing was drinking, so I can't even, I have no perspective on the drugs, right? So from a drinking perspective, if you don't drink for a week, doesn't mean that you're miraculously cured of your problem, right? I remember my grandma used to call it the cure. My grandma, oh, that guy went through the cure, the cure. And I laugh about that, still. But if you think you have a problem, you most likely do. And don't
Yeah.
stop thinking about it. Just go and get help.
Thank you for that. I like that advice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So do you have anything else you want to add in?
No, thanks for having me on. I truly enjoy um I truly enjoy doing this. I I really do. Talking about my own situation, and hopefully maybe it resonates with a couple of people that listen to your program, and they can, get something out of it, is powerful. I just had a conversation with somebody the other day. Um, I do a lot of work with first responders in a mental health wellness capacity. And someone had said to me, I want to save, because we just had a few more police officers kill themselves. And I'm like, look, you can only affect your sphere of influence, right? The people that are impactful in your life. You can't reach everybody, but the people you can reach, if you can reach one person, one person, and help one person, then that person will help somebody, and it's just contagious. So, um, be that person that helps others through your own example, I guess, is my last thing I want to say.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Be yourself.
100%. Be yourself.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us sometimes in recovery they think we shouldn't be ourselves, and it's like, no, that's when you need to be yourself the most.
100%.
You know?
Know thyself, right?
Yep, exactly. To thy
Because
own self be true. Is that it? Something like that?
yes, that's exactly what it is. And if you're, I try to avoid situations where I know that, you know, I don't, again, being in a bagpipe band, having those people, they're consistently drinking. I mean, they drink. It's just part of the culture. And I don't have a lot of difficulty being around them when I do, but there's times I got to walk away from it. I'm like, okay, I got to go. Back in the day when I drank, I'm there till, I'm the last guy leaving for sure. Right now, it's like, yeah, I'm out of here. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need this. And it's part of me is a fear of relapse, knowing thyself. Right? Like, it, I had a party here. Um, you know, uh, one of the guys that we played in the band with, that's where I met Mary and in the band. And he's having his second child. He's a younger guy. So he's lives in Wisconsin, about an hour and a half away from us. So we decided to host a party with the bandmates where he came. And, naturally we have beer and food at the party. And I remember he brought 3 cases of beer that was like one of my go-tos, right? The Spotted Cow. It's like this IPA from Wisconsin. Everyone here loves it. I'm like, man, he's got to bring this. It's like my kryptonite, man. So I remember going to the bathroom in the basement of the house, and I'm thinking, maybe if I just snuck one out of the fridge and chugged one, just one, like just one, who would know, right? Like I would know, but I'd be fine with just one. Come on, it won't hurt. Like my addict brain is talking to me, and I've got the devil and angel. I got the devil on one shoulder, the angel on the other. Devil's like, go ahead, man. You can do it. You can do it. And the angel's going, Danny, come on, man. Don't be a jerk. You know what's going to happen if you have one. You're not going to be able to have one. You can't do this. So the angel prevailed, obviously, right? I mean, I'm
Yeah,
like, but I'm like, I can't. He left, and there was like 2 cases of it. As soon as he left, I went to one of my neighbors and said, here's 2 cases of Spotted Cow. He's, oh man, thanks. Get it out of my house. Right. I know myself. Right. That is when you have to be yourself the most, is when you're sober, for
yeah,
sure.
absolutely, absolutely. So I think it's a good spot to wrap it up. How do you feel?
Oh, I feel great, man. Thanks for letting me come on, tell my story. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. So do
Yeah.
me a favor and sit tight. And for everybody watching and listening, if you like what you heard, go below and give us a like. Also subscribe to see when we upload new videos. You can check us out on Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr, and TikTok. I also suggest checking out our website, www.addicts-anonymous.com. There you'll find plenty of resources as well as some free literature. That's all I have for today. So once again, I hope you enjoyed. And until next time.